Sir, I need you to step out of the water feature, Officer Ramirez called from my property line, clearly trying not to laugh. It's a pond, I corrected, cradling Emperor Bubbles, my prize orange and white koi, in a water-filled plastic container. And I'd be happy to chat once all my fish are safely relocated. Mr. Davidson, the HOA has given you ample notice, Cynthia Winters said, tapping her clipboard with a French manicured nail. Her HOA windbreaker looked freshly pressed despite the summer heat. Section 18.3 clearly prohibits standing water features exceeding 12 inches in depth without proper permitting, which I applied for, twice. I carefully transferred Emperor Bubbles to the kiddie pool, where his subjects already swam in confused circles. Not my fault the HOA Architectural Committee only meets once in a leap year or during solar eclipses. The committee meets monthly, Cynthia replied icily. Your application was denied. Both times. On what grounds? Aesthetic incompatibility with neighborhood standards. I looked around at the cookie-cutter houses with their identical landscaping. Heaven forbid someone have personality in Sunny Valley Estates. Officer Ramirez cleared his throat. Sir, I'm just here to keep the peace while you comply with the HOA directive. You did sign the covenant agreement when you purchased the property. I sighed, looking at my beautiful pond with its waterfall feature that had taken 3 months to perfect. Fine, I'll drain it. But this isn't over. Cynthia smiled thinly. Of course it is, Mr. Davidson. The rules are quite clear. As they walked away, a plan began forming in my mind. If there's one thing my architecture degree and 10 years as a commercial designer had taught me, it was that rules were made to be creatively interpreted. Let me back up. I'm Maxwell Davidson, Max to friends, and that troublemaker in lot 47 inches to the HOA board. 6 months ago, I moved back to my hometown after a decade designing commercial recreation centers and water parks in Chicago. The constant deadlines and Midwest winters had finally worn me down, and a position at a local architecture firm offered the perfect escape. I bought a modest 4-bedroom in Sunny Valley Estates, attracted by the central location and the large backyard that backed up to a protected green space. The houses were a bit cookie-cutter for my taste, but I figured I could add personality through landscaping. My first project was transforming the barren backyard into a tranquil retreat centered around a koi pond. I spent weekends digging, laying liner, arranging stones, and installing a recirculating pump and filter system. I added Japanese maples, ornamental grasses, and a small meditation bench. When finished, it was magnificent, if I do say so myself. The water burbled peacefully over the stone waterfall, dragonflies skimmed the surface, and my collection of koi, each named after royalty, brought vibrant colors to the crystal-clear water. Then came the first letter from the HOA. Mr. Davidson, I understand your frustration, but rules exist for a reason, Richard Pembroke, HOA president, said from behind his massive desk. The HOA office, located in the community clubhouse, was decorated with photos of past Yard of the Month winners, all featuring nearly identical landscaping. What reason? My pond is professionally designed, properly filtered, and poses no safety hazard, I argued. Standing water attracts mosquitoes, Richard replied automatically. It's a flowing system with fish that eat mosquito larvae. It could be a drowning hazard. It's in my fenced backyard, and it's only 3 feet deep at its deepest point. Richard hesitated, then straightened his golf polo. Not in keeping with the established aesthetic guidelines of Sunny Valley Estates. Meaning? Frankly, Mr. Davidson, it's a bit ethnic. I blinked. Excuse me? The Asian influence, he clarified, as if that made it better. The koi, the Japanese maple, the stone arrangements. It's all rather foreign to our community standards. My jaw clenched. So if I'd put in a bird bath and some lawn gnomes, we wouldn't be having this conversation? Lawn ornaments exceeding 18 inches in height are also prohibited, as per section 23.5, he replied, without missing a beat. The directive stands. Remove the pond within 72 hours. I left his office seething. It wasn't just the casual prejudice or the waste of my time and money. It was the smug certainty that I would simply comply. That evening, after drowning my frustrations in a stiff drink, I pulled out the community covenant and began reading it line by line. By midnight, I'd found several interesting inconsistencies in the water feature regulations. By 2 a.m., I had the beginnings of a plan that would technically comply with every HOA regulation, while simultaneously making Richard Pembroke's remaining hair fall out. "You're going to need this," Mrs. Abernathy said, sliding a thick binder across her kitchen table. The elderly woman had served on the original HOA board before being ousted in what she called the Beige Revolution of 2018. "What is it?" I asked. Opening the binder to find meeting minutes, architectural guidelines, and amendment histories. "Everything they don't want you to know," she replied with a mischievous smile, "including all rejected amendment proposals and legal opinions from the HOA attorney." I flipped through the pages. "This is gold, Mrs. Abernathy, but why help me? They made me remove my rose garden because the colors were too vibrant for community standards." Her eyes narrowed. "I've been waiting 3 years for someone with the skills to give Richard Pembroke a proper headache." "Well, I'm an architect specializing in recreational facilities," I said, finding a particularly interesting section on water features. "And it seems there's a very specific definition of standing water that doesn't include moving water with a continuous flow rate above 2 gallons per minute." "My late husband was a plumber," Mrs. Abernathy said. "I've still got some of his professional-grade equipment in the garage if you need it." "Mrs. Abernathy, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." Armed with insider knowledge, I spent the next week revising my plans. The HOA covenant had a glaring loophole. While standing water features were strictly regulated, flowing water recreational installations were barely mentioned, with only vague guidelines about depth and noise levels. My next stop was finding a contractor brave enough to take on an HOA project. "Let me get this straight," said Mike from Splash Zone Installations, reviewing my sketches. "You want to build a miniature flowing water recreation system in your backyard?" "Exactly, with multiple water jets, a meandering creek feature, and several depth-compliant interactive zones." "So, a small water park. I prefer residential aquatic recreational installation," I replied, pointing to specific language from the HOA covenant. "Note that it never exceeds 11.5 inches in depth, includes no standing water, and maintains a constant flow rate of 3.2 gallons per minute." Mike scratched his beard. "This is to replace a koi pond? Seems like overkill." "The HOA rejected my pond for aesthetic reasons." "Ah, one of those situations." He studied the plans more carefully. "This is actually pretty brilliant from a technical standpoint. Completely within code, smartly designed water reclamation system." He looked up. "But it'll cost about 4 times what your pond did. Worth every penny. And the noise from the pumps and the water features will all fall within the county noise ordinance limits," I finished with a smile. "You've really thought this through. I design water parks professionally. This is just a scale model." Mike laughed. "I normally avoid HOA neighborhoods like the plague, but for this, I'm in. When do we start?" The first stage of my plan required full compliance with the HOA's directive. I carefully relocated my koi to a local aquarium store, with visitation rights negotiated, and drained the pond completely. When Cynthia performed her inspection a week later, she found only a dirt depression where my pond had been. "I see you've complied, Mr. Davidson," she said, making notes on her clipboard. "Always happy to follow the rules," I replied pleasantly. "I'm planning a dry creek bed feature to fill in the space, all within guidelines, of course." "That would be acceptable," she said, clearly suspicious of my sudden cooperation. "Wonderful. I've already filed the landscape modification form. Should be automatically approved next Tuesday if I don't hear back." "The committee will review it promptly," she assured me. They didn't, of course, which activated Section 14.2 of the Covenant, automatic approval of minor landscape modifications after 14 business days without response. Construction began the following Monday. I took 2 weeks of vacation to oversee the project personally. Mike and his crew arrived early each morning and worked diligently within the permitted hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. "Mr. Davidson, we've received reports of significant construction activity at your residence," Cynthia called over my fence one Saturday morning. "May I ask what you're installing?" I emerged from my garage with a wheelbarrow full of river rocks. "Good morning, Cynthia. Just some landscaping after removing the pond, as required." "That's quite a lot of material for simple landscaping," she observed, trying to peer around me. "Well, I had to fill in the hole from the pond," I explained innocently. "Going for a dry creek bed aesthetic. Very popular in desert-friendly landscaping. Zero standing water, I promise." "I see," she said, not seeing at all. "And the permit posted in your window?" "Standard landscape redesign permit, all filed with the county." "Perhaps the architectural committee should review your plans." "Already approved by default," I interrupted cheerfully. "According to Section 14.2 of the Covenant, if the committee doesn't respond to a basic landscape modification request within 14 business days, approval is automatically granted. It's been 17 days since I submitted my paperwork." Her smile tightened. "I'll have to verify that." "Please do. I documented everything carefully. Have a great day, Cynthia." As she walked away, Mike emerged from behind the fence. "Man, I thought my ex-wife was scary. That woman makes her look like a puppy." "Cynthia's just the enforcer. Wait till you meet Richard." "The HOA president?" "The very same. He's the reason we're building this monument to malicious compliance." Mike grinned. "Speaking of which, the main pump system is installed. Want to test the central jets?" We spent the afternoon fine-tuning the water pressure of what would soon be the most technically compliant water feature in HOA history. "What are you building, Mr. D?" asked Tina, the 10-year-old from next door, peering through the fence slats with her brother Kevin. "Just a little water feature," I replied, installing a particularly clever hidden nozzle system. "Looks like the splash pad at the park," Kevin observed. "What a coincidence," I grinned. "It's inspired by that design." "Mom says the HOA is going to flip when they see what you're doing," Tina shared. "She's got popcorn ready." "Your mom sounds like a wise woman." "She hates how they made her paint her front door from red to agreeable gray," Kevin added. "Well, perhaps your mom would like to attend the grand opening next weekend?" Both kids' eyes widened. "There's gonna be a grand opening." "Every good water feature deserves a proper inauguration, don't you think?" Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. By Tuesday, the street was regularly lined with cars as neighbors happened to walk by during their evening strolls, trying to glimpse what was happening behind my privacy fence. The project wasn't without challenges. The water pressure required for the multiple jets strained the standard residential plumbing. Mrs. Abernathy's nephew Jorge, a master plumber, solved this with a clever system of auxiliary pumps and pressure regulators. "This is serious overkill for a backyard," Jorge noted, installing a commercial-grade filter system. That's rather the point, I replied. Hey, no judgment. My HOA made me remove my Christmas lights in February because I was on a cruise during January. Seems to be a common experience. Yeah, well, this setup will recirculate 500 gallons per hour without wasting a drop. All the water drains into that collection basin, filters through the 4-stage system, and recirculates. It's actually more efficient than most commercial systems. By Friday, we were conducting final tests. The flowing water recreation system featured a meandering stream never exceeding 11.5 inches in depth, multiple water jets that could shoot up to 3 feet in the air, several splash pads with different interactive water features, a mini lazy river that could float a small inner tube, water cannons that could be aimed and fired by children, LED lighting for nighttime illumination within light pollution guidelines, a sophisticated drainage system that prevented any standing water. All of it was designed to be aesthetically pleasing, with natural stone elements and careful landscaping that made it look like a high-end resort feature rather than a backyard addition. Just as we were testing the water cannons, Officer Ramirez returned. Mr. Davidson? He was back, looking vaguely embarrassed. We've received noise complaints from the HOA office. I checked my watch. It's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, well within permitted construction hours? I know, but apparently your project is causing undue community concern. Is that a crime? No, sir. He shifted awkwardly. Look, off the record, what exactly are you building? The HOA president called it a water-based abomination. I showed him the plans. A recirculating water feature that strictly complies with all HOA regulations. No standing water, nothing deeper than 11.5 inches, and totally awesome. Officer Ramirez studied the designs. This looks like a mini water park. Strange coincidence, isn't it? A smile tugged at his lips. My kids would love this. Grand opening next Saturday. Bring them by. I might do that, in a non-official capacity, of course. He handed back the plans. For the record, I've measured your construction noise at 68 decibels, which is within the 70 decibel limit for residential areas. Have a nice day, sir. The grand opening was a bigger success than I'd anticipated. What started as a small gathering of immediate neighbors quickly expanded to include families from throughout Sunny Valley estates. Children shrieked with delight as they ran through water jets and fired water cannons. Parents chatted and enjoyed the cold beverages I'd provided. This is amazing, said Linda, Tina, and Kevin's mother. We usually drive 30 minutes to the community pool, but this is perfect for younger kids. Just a little home improvement project, I replied modestly. A little petty revenge, you mean? She winked. Don't worry, we're all rooting for you. The HOA has gotten out of control lately. I'd just finished explaining the water filtration system to an impressed father when a hush fell over the gathering. Richard Pembroke and Cynthia Winters stood at the entrance to my backyard, looking like they'd just bitten into lemons. Mr. Davidson, Richard's voice carried across the suddenly quiet yard. What exactly is this? My new water feature, I replied cheerfully. Fully compliant with all HOA regulations. Would you like a demonstration? Before he could answer, Tina helpfully fired a water cannon in his direction. The stream fell short by several feet, but the message was clear. This is clearly not what was approved in your landscaping request, Cynthia interjected, flipping through papers on her clipboard. Actually, my request was for a flowing water feature with interactive elements. That's exactly what this is. This is a commercial water park installation, Richard sputtered. It's a residential aquatic recreation feature, I corrected. Completely non-commercial, with no standing water over 12 inches as per section 18.3, and a continuous flow rate exceeding the minimum 2 gallons per minute required to classify as a flowing water feature, rather than a standing water feature. Xiao. Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. The HOA board will be addressing this immediately. Expect formal notice by Monday. I look forward to it, I replied. Would you like some lemonade before you go? They stormed off, providing the day's entertainment highlight for my assembled guests. That was better than the water cannons, Mrs. Abernathy chuckled. True to his word, Richard called an emergency HOA meeting for the following Tuesday evening. This is an outrageous circumvention of the covenant's intent. Richard Pembroke's face had turned an alarming shade of purple as he addressed the emergency HOA meeting. The community center was packed with residents, many of whom had attended my grand opening. Point of order, I said, raising my hand. Could you specify which covenant rule my water feature violates? It's clearly a commercial water park installation in a residential zone. It's a residential water feature, I corrected. Completely non-commercial, with no standing water over 12 inches as per section 18.3, and a continuous flow rate exceeding the minimum 2 gallons per minute required to classify as a flowing water feature, rather than a standing water feature. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Furthermore, I continued, the installation is not visible from the street, maintains appropriate setbacks from property lines, and the equipment operates at 68 decibels, 2 below the covenant's noise restriction. It's a water park. Richard slammed his hand on the podium. It's a creative interpretation of the flowing water feature allowance in section 18.4, I replied calmly. Which, I'll remind everyone, was the only type of water feature I could install after my professionally designed, ecologically beneficial koi pond was rejected for aesthetic reasons. The board will need to confer, Cynthia interjected, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. While you're conferring, called Mrs. Abernathy from the back row, perhaps you could explain why the Roberts family has had a fish pond for 6 years without issue, while Mr. Davidson's was rejected. More murmurs, louder this time. The Roberts pond was grandfathered in from before the current regulations, Richard said quickly. Actually, Mrs. Abernathy countered, pulling a document from her purse. They installed it in 2018, after the current covenant was established. Here's their approval letter, signed by you, Richard. The meeting erupted into chaos. 2 days later, I received a formal cease and desist letter from the HOA's attorney, demanding I remove the non-conforming water installation within 10 days or face legal action. I immediately called Sarah Chen, an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. This is beautiful work, Sarah Chen said, examining my water installation. She'd swapped her lawyer attire for casual clothes to visit on a Sunday. And legally fascinating. Can they force me to remove it? I asked. She flipped through the HOA covenant, which she'd marked extensively. Not easily. You've navigated their own rules with impressive precision. The issue they're likely to push is that this constitutes a change in use of residential property. It's a water feature in my backyard, which you've invited neighbors to enjoy, she pointed out. They'll argue that makes it a community amenity, which requires different permits. So I should stop letting the neighborhood kids use it? Actually, she smiled, I'd recommend a different approach. Apply for a variance. They'll never approve it. Of course not, but it forces them to publicly articulate exactly why they're rejecting it, and based on what I'm seeing in their previous decisions, they've been inconsistent in enforcement. That opens the door to a discrimination claim. Because they allowed the Roberts family to have a pond? Exactly. Selective enforcement is a major vulnerability for HOAs. Plus, she added, Filing for a variance triggers a mandatory public hearing where all homeowners can weigh in. I thought about the neighborhood kids who'd been enjoying my creation, and their parents who'd been thanking me for providing entertainment during the hot summer. A public hearing could be very interesting. Indeed, Sarah agreed. Now show me how that water cannon works again. For legal research purposes, of course. The variance hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, the neighborhood had clearly divided into two camps. Families with children overwhelmingly supported my water feature, delighted to have a free, convenient place for kids to play during the hot summer. The HOA Old Guard, led by Richard, complained about noise, increased foot traffic, and potential impact on property values. Several neighbors reported receiving calls from Richard and Cynthia, pressuring them to attend the hearing and speak against my disturbance of community standards. This backfired spectacularly when one neighbor recorded the call and shared it widely. By the time the hearing arrived, the community center was standing room only. "Before we vote on Mr. Davidson's variance request," Mrs. Abernathy said, approaching the microphone with a folder of documents, "I'd like to submit evidence that the Architectural Committee has been selectively enforcing water feature regulations based on personal relationships." Richard tried to interrupt. "This isn't relevant to—" "It's directly relevant to equal protection under the covenant," Sarah Chen interjected from beside me. "As Mr. Davidson's counsel, we request these documents be entered into the record." Mrs. Abernathy distributed copies of approval letters. "As you can see, Board Member Thompson has a pond with a fountain. Board Member Willis has a hot tub that technically violates the standing water provision. And President Pembroke's brother-in-law on Maple Street has an entire swimming pool that was approved in under 48 hours, while other residents waited months for basic reviews." The room erupted in angry comments. I caught Richard's eye across the room. For the first time, he looked worried. "Additionally," Mrs. Abernathy continued, "I have emails showing that Mr. Davidson's pond was rejected specifically because, and I quote, 'We don't need any more of that foreign influence in the neighborhood aesthetic.'" A hushed silence fell. Even Richard's allies looked uncomfortable. "In light of this evidence," Sarah stood, "we're prepared to file a federal housing discrimination claim based on disparate impact and cultural bias, unless Mr. Davidson's variance is approved immediately." Richard huddled with the HOA attorney, whose expression grew increasingly alarmed as they whispered. "Perhaps," Richard finally said, "we can table this matter for further review." "No more delays," I said, standing. "Vote now, or we file tomorrow morning." After a tense 15 minutes of private consultation, the board returned with a counteroffer. A special committee would be formed to discuss compromise options, with representatives from both sides. "We're prepared to offer a conditional approval," Richard said stiffly across the negotiation table. The small conference room at the community center felt tense with Sarah Chen on one side of me and Mrs. Abernathy on the other. "I'm listening," I replied. "You can maintain your water feature with 3 conditions: limited operational hours from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., reduced water jet height from 3 feet to 2, and a proper fence around the perimeter." "The fence is reasonable for safety," I conceded. "The hours as well, but the water jets are already designed to be variable. I won't permanently reduce their capacity." "Mr. Davidson. However," I continued, "I will agree to keep them at or below 2 feet during normal operation, with the option to increase height for special occasions with 48-hour notice to adjacent neighbors." Richard looked to their attorney, who nodded slightly. "Fine," he said. "But we also want a formal statement that this installation is not precedent-setting for future water features." "Unacceptable," Sarah interjected. "That undermines the core issue of equal application of rules." "What we can agree to," I offered, is participating in a committee to revise the water feature guidelines to be more specific, objective, and equitably enforced. After 3 hours of negotiation, we reached a compromise. I would add a decorative fence, limit regular operational hours, and moderate the water jet height on normal days. In exchange, the HOA would establish clear, objective standards for all water features and review previously rejected applications under the new guidelines. Most importantly, I would serve on the committee drafting these new standards. 2 months later, I sat in my backyard, watching neighborhood kids play in my modified water feature while their parents chatted nearby. The new decorative fence added a nice touch, and the water jets at their standard height were still plenty of fun for the children. But the best part was yet to come. "It looks wonderful," Mrs. Abernathy said, admiring my newly reinstalled koi pond, complete with a small waterfall that fed into a meandering stream before circulating back. Emperor Bubbles and his subjects had returned home, swimming contentedly among the water lilies. Thanks to the new guidelines, I was able to have both: the pond I wanted and a smaller version of the water feature that the neighborhood kids love. I gestured to where several children were playing in the gentle splash pad section along the stream's edge. "Who would have thought your architectural rebellion would lead to you joining the architectural committee?" She chuckled. "Apparently, my expertise in water features was suddenly valuable," I replied, though I suspect they also wanted to keep me where they could see me. Officer Ramirez waved from where he was watching his kids play. "This turned out great, Max. Much better than writing up noise complaints every weekend." "Just doing my part for community harmony," I called back. As if on cue, Richard Pembroke walked past my front yard, pausing briefly to look at the activity in my backyard. Our eyes met. He gave a stiff nod, not quite approval, but acknowledgement. Progress of a sort. "You know," I said to Mrs. Abernathy, "I've been thinking about how bland the community entrance landscaping is. As a committee member, I might have some suggestions involving a rather spectacular fountain." She patted my arm. "One battle at a time, dear. One battle at a time." But we both knew. The next design was already taking shape in my mind. After all, rules were just opportunities for creative interpretation.